ASEAN People Speak, Season 5. I'm Regine Jessica Abuel, your host for this podcast. For our fourth episode, we will explore the situation of stateless and displaced people in ASEAN. Joining us is a dedicated human rights researcher and activist who has been working for 8 years on civil and political rights, LGBTQ plus rights, climate justice, statelessness, and refugee rights, free from discrimination, abuse, and violence. She is committed to feminist participatory research that centers the voices and agency of affected communities, commissioned by the National Human Rights Institution of Malaysia. She holds a Master in Science and Bachelor in Science in Economics from the University of East Anglia and is a professional fellow for civic engagement under the Young Southeast Asian Leaders Initiative. Everyone, let us welcome our fourth guest for this season, Nicole Fong. Hi, Nicole.
Hello, thank you for having me here today.
And thank you so much for your time and presence for our fourth episode this fifth season. So, we'll dive into our topic about statelessness and people who have been displaced in the ASEAN region. Can you tell us about the rising number of stateless persons across ASEAN and maybe to also give us some context to understand this crisis? Maybe you could also give us a background on the root causes, such as the historical, legal, and maybe the discriminatory factors that contribute to statelessness or the risk of losing nationality, particularly in the different countries or states in ASEAN.
Okay, yeah. Maybe if we just start from the foundations of it all, maybe just to define what statelessness is. So statelessness is a condition where a person is not recognized as a national or citizen by any country or state under its operation of its law. So it's basically a person who has no citizenship, and without any citizenship, you lack access to identity documents and also the rights and protections that entail or that come with having access to citizenship and these identity documents. And maybe in Southeast Asia, there's many different root causes, but I think I want to start off with one of the things, which is I think a lot of our nationality laws in Southeast Asia have been shaped by colonial legacies. A lot of it, we've inherited these colonial legal systems that actually have, racial classifications and also a lot of gender discriminatory provisions that kind of like dictate who can have nationality and whether certain genders can confer nationality. Like maybe a very easy example to give is in a number of Southeast Asian countries, in Brunei, Malaysia, the Philippines, Thailand, and Singapore, there are certain provisions that deny mothers to confer their citizenship if they give birth abroad. So that's like one very, very clear-cut example. And there's also other, gender discriminatory provisions. But I think I'll go more into that later. I think maybe just to like reframe what statelessness or how statelessness looks like in Southeast Asia, it's a very structural, systemic, and intergenerational issue. It's the state's failure to give or recognize a person's right to nationality, and therefore all the exclusion and access to rights and basic necessities. And I think maybe to situate it in the context of ASEAN, what are we talking about when we're talking about stateless? Like in our latest SEEP report, which is the Statelessness Encyclopedia Asia Pacific report, I think it is a slightly outdated number, but it's the latest number that we have in the report, which is up to 2022, is that Southeast Asia hosts 1.4 million stateless persons. And based on this figure alone, it makes it the largest number of stateless people in the region when you compare it to the other regions in the world. And this is based on UNHCR statistics. But this doesn't include Laos and Timor-Leste. But yeah, it's a big number. And so it's not like I think a lot of people think about it as a sort of abstract legal issue, but actually it's a very serious issue that affects a lot of the lived realities of people, affects their access to education, healthcare, employment, legal protection, access to banking, and just freedom of movement. And maybe before I pause for a second, I think, a lot when we're talking about stateless persons in Southeast Asia, there are kind of two main groups of stateless persons. One is called in situ stateless persons, where you are people, you have been born in the country, you have long-standing ties to the country, you've lived there your whole life. It's just that you have never had citizenship, and you, for whatever reason, you will remain stateless. Or there are situations where, because of forced displacement, like let's say the Rohingya, like you have become stateless as a result of the forced displacement. But for a majority of the people in Southeast Asia, it is in situ statelessness. And yeah, maybe I will pause there if you have any questions, or should I continue with the root causes?
Yes, you can actually continue with the
There's
root causes. So I'll
Okay,
just prompt you another one.
I see, I
Okay.
see. Can.
And so thank you for clarifying those two kinds of statelessness. And we actually appreciate that you've differentiated the two of them. Now we want to ask you then, what is usually the root cause of statelessness, especially in the ASEAN region?
As an ethnic group, they are effectively excluding them as an ethnic group, and therefore they become stateless. And besides that, there also the case of in Brunei. So the ethnic Chinese in Brunei also face are at risk of statelessness, because a lot of citizenship in Brunei is restricted to indigenous groups of Malay ethnicity. So that's why there are around like 20,000 ethnic Chinese people in Brunei. And even like in Thailand as well, we have the hill tribe communities who have also been historically sidelined, and they are discriminated on the basis of them being part of these hill tribe communities who live by the borders or very remote regions in Thailand. So that's one, ethnic and racial discrimination. And then the second one, I think, I've mentioned earlier, which is, gender discrimination. Very, very, I think a very big case in Malaysia. Last year, a group of affected mothers, they actually filed a constitutional challenge. If you are in an unregistered marriage in Malaysia, you also are not able to confer your citizenship to your child. So, and that's something that's actually written in our federal constitution, that actually gives preferential treatment or priority to, basically, you can give citizenship only in a proper recognized marriage by the government. Anything that's customary or unregistered, they don't recognize. So that's like one very, very clear example. In Brunei, there's also very similar rules about Bruneian women not able to pass their citizenship to the children of their foreign spouses, because basically their male counterparts can do so. And in the Philippines as well, it's also I think there's a actually
A
wait
lot.
let's go to the Philippines. There's a lot, yeah.
Yes, there are a lot of gender based, or at least like those laws that have been um, discriminatory
Yeah,
against gender, um, whether it's criminal, civil, or those things. But yes, do please give us
yeah.
examples.
Yeah, like I think it's the same case in the Philippines as well. I think citizen women cannot confer their nationality to a foreign spouse on the same basis of men. And I think there's also like a combination of both ethnic and discrimination and gender discrimination when it comes to stateless persons of Japanese descent who were born in the Philippines
Ah,
between the 1930s and the 1970s very long sentence, to Filipino mothers and Japanese fathers.
okay.
Yeah, so I think the children of those kind of marriages face issues in getting citizenship, but just because of these discriminatory provisions. And also very, very similar in Singapore, if you are a child born to a Singaporean mother, but your
Mhm.
father is a foreign diplomat, your child cannot be a Singaporean citizen. So I think just to illustrate that there are so many examples of mostly in this case mothers not being able to confer their nationality or citizenship to their child. because of these
Mm.
gender discriminatory provisions. So that's a
Mm.
very, very big thing. I think a very, very big issue is on poor or unequal access to civil registration. And what I mean by that is that people cannot access, cannot register births or get the birth certificates. And without birth certificates, it becomes very hard for you to access other legal identity documents. Let's say your identity cards or your citizenship certificates. So maybe if I were to give you an example, uh, if we talk about the hill tribe communities in Thailand, they live in a very remote area. So they live in very remote areas. So it actually makes it very difficult. Like it's very remote and it's in the mountains. So it's very far away to travel to, the civil registration office.
Yes.
You may lack the financial resources needed to get to these places, or yeah, or maybe you had a home birth and they don't recognize that.
Yeah.
So then it just results in very, very low birth certificates. And I think my statistic is that, wait, no, this is not the right statistic. Sorry. Let me
It's
backtrack that. But yeah.
I appreciate that we talked about the root causes of statelessness and how the laws actually affect, at the very start, the citizenship, or the fact that one cannot be given a citizenship because of different factors,
Yeah.
mostly legal. Now, may I also ask, since we've talked about the legal aspect of it and all the other things that contribute to it, let's now talk about how statelessness and refugee status deny access to basic rights. So we've discussed about the root cause. Now we want to talk about the effects. So if you can also discuss to us or enlighten us about the consequences of statelessness when it comes to basic rights such as education, healthcare, and legal protection.
Okay. Yeah. I think, a very, very very easy clear cut example is the Rohingya refugees from Myanmar. And I think I will give you a Malaysian example because I'm Malaysian.
Mm,
And I think maybe
sure.
just to preface that not all Rohingya refugees actually identify as stateless refugees. They definitely
Okay.
identify as refugees, but some of them identify as just refugees. Some of them identify as stateless refugees. I think I'm just making the distinction to acknowledge that this difference and not everyone of them, what do you call it? Yeah, identifies as so. But
Mhm.
regardless of what they identify as, in Malaysia, when we talk about the impact of rights, they don't have access to they because of their they don't have any legal protection. They're not recognized as a refugee or citizen in Malaysia. It means that they are basically undocumented and they are at risk of arrest, indefinite detention, and also forced deportation back to Myanmar or back to another country that they came from. Because they don't have this legal protection either as a stateless person or as a refugee, they also don't have access to public health systems, education, employment, banking, and freedom of movement is also impacted. So what that
Mm,
means is that in the
mhm.
Malaysian context, though, they have to access education, they have to attend these things called alternative learning centers, which is all NGO run, or let's say sometimes it's church run, to access education, and that's also only if you have access to that. And then to access public health care, you can only get a discount if you have a UNHCR issued card. And not
Oh,
everyone in Malaysia has a UNHCR card because it's very
exactly.
hard to access. So yeah,
And
and
before you can have one, you have to apply for it, right?
so that's one very clear example. And there and in Malaysia, I think also they are, because they don't have access to formal employment, they also are at risk to doing very informal work that may be dangerous, let's say in construction that's not regulated. And yeah, they're always at risk of getting caught by the authorities and being put in detention centers in Malaysia, historically known for being overpopulated, and they face ill treatment and torture in detention. So it's not good in Malaysia. In terms of maybe if I talk about a bit about the ethnic Vietnamese in Cambodia. um,
Sure, sure.
yeah, so they actually are also one of the largest, quite a large population of in situ stateless populations in Southeast Asia. There's around 75,000 people who are facing statelessness there, and they've lived in Cambodia for generations, but because of their forced displacement during the Khmer Rouge or conflict, they were forced to relocate there. And I think maybe just to go back a bit about birth registration, they face very big issues with documentation. A 2016
Mhm.
study found that only 5% of ethnic, Vietnamese people in Cambodia have a birth certificate. And this birth
Oh,
certificate basically affects everything, right? You cannot
yeah.
get access to a lot of identity documents.
Mhm.
And there are naturalization pathways in Cambodia for you to apply to, but if you don't have this in place, then you can't uh, you can't get citizenship. So you're
Mhm.
stuck in this. And I think maybe just to use this as an example to talk about the intergenerational issues of it, like there are many generations of people living there who they just continue living there without citizenship, and you're always stuck in this cycle, because
Yes,
your
I was
children
gonna
get
point that
born.
out.
Yeah,
Yes,
your
that
children get born
you
without
couldn't
citizenship.
apply for a citizenship because you lack something, and then you go back to the fact that when you were born, or when you were at least when you were entered into this world, you were not given anything at all, and it goes back like it's a circle, or it goes to a never-ending cycle, and
Yeah.
it is passed on from one generation to another. And and I appreciate that you've talked us through some of the examples. And maybe another thing that I would like to point out are the sea nomads, or
Yes.
the Sama Dilaut, the
Mhm.
maritime people of Southeast Asia, who have historically, lived across maritime borders of the Philippines, Malaysia, and Indonesia. And their traditional lifestyle is based on mobility and fishing,
Mhm.
that makes them highly vulnerable to statelessness. And these people also experience that lack of birth certificates, and they also face discrimination when they remain at the margins of legal recognition and even state protection. So, yes, would you like to add
Yeah.
on that?
Yes, yeah. No, yeah. I was just about to talk about that. Yeah, I think I think this particular community is unique to, like you said, the three countries: Indonesia, Malaysia, and the Philippines. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, they are, traditionally maritime sea nomad communities. And I think when we talk about their access to birth registration, they also are at risk of being detained by the authorities. At least on the Malaysia side, they do get detained and put into
Mm.
detention centers,
Detention
and they're
centers.
labeled as undocumented migrants because of the lack of documentation. But I actually wanted to point out also that there are alternative learning centers for them there, like one or two in the Sabah side, but
Mm-hmm.
they are still facing, access to school, access to health. And I think one story, or maybe two stories, that I want to share a little bit about them was that last year, actually, besides facing the lack of access to basic public services and the rights that you were afforded. Last year, the villages in Semporna, which is in Sabah, uh, of these Baja Laut
Mm-hmm.
people, the Sabah state government basically, the Sabah state government demolished and burnt their houses down without
Oh.
any meaningful consultation with them, and
Mm-hmm.
they also did not provide them any alternative housing. So,
Mm-hmm.
besides all the things that we've mentioned, they're also at risk to forced evictions. And because
Yes.
they're not, seen as citizens, I think to the state government, they don't see them as they don't see the need to provide these alternative housing or just consultations that should have happened. Yeah, so that's one very serious case. And and a lot of civil society activists talked about it, and they also face persecution for talking about it, because the
Oh.
government clamped down on them for talking about these forced evictions. So it's a very sensitive issue
Mm-hmm.
here in Malaysia, and
Yes.
also maybe one other story about this is also in terms of their what do you call it, access to rights,
Mm-hmm.
is that I want to talk more about the health aspect. So, like, actually, in 2023, there was a really big story that came out that the Malaysian media reported that stateless mothers from the Bajau Laut community in Sabah reported that their infants that were being born in a hospital were
Mm-hmm.
being placed into adoption without their consent.
Oh,
Basically, their babies were getting
oh.
snatched by the government. So, I think this is a really, really important story to share about how
Mm-hmm.
when you're stateless, when you have no identity documents or citizenship, or it leaves you with no protection,
Yeah.
because a
And
lot
you
of
are
them,
deprived. You are deprived of a
yeah,
lot of things. I mean, this is life. I mean, your child is being taken away from you right then and
yeah,
there because they don't recognize you as citizens. And at the same time, you've mentioned about being deprived of your property because your house
mhm,
is burnt down,
yeah,
or because the state does not recognize you as a citizen anyway, so you're not protected in any way. There's a lack of due process. There are so
mhm,
many basic human rights violations, and it's very devastating to hear these stories. And I thank you for sharing these things with us, because these are actually eye openers, especially for people who are not that aware of these stateless, the status of statelessness, and how many people are affected in the ASEAN region. So I guess now we'd like to move and ask you about the ASEAN region itself, um,
mhm.
towards regional action. Can you discuss with us? Of course, you've mentioned the root causes, and then the violations, and the violations and the basic human rights that are being affected because of statelessness. Now let's move towards our discussion on states. What is the ASEAN region doing? And can you also discuss or tell us if there are already mechanisms in place? And I guess if there is, of course, like I would think that there is a call for stronger ASEAN cooperation when it comes to national reforms to recognize, protect, and even empower stateless and displaced communities. We recognize that. Oh, okay, go ahead.
Okay, okay. No, thank you. I think when we're talking about sort of regional action and at the ASEAN level, I think there's a very big opportunity coming up for the Philippines, who is assuming ASEAN
Mm-hmm.
chair in 2026.
Mm-hmm.
The reason being is because when we talk about if we talk about the human rights treaties and the ratification level, the Philippines is the only one who has ratified both the statelessness conventions and
Yes.
also the refugee convention.
Oh, so
And
it's only the Philippines who has
it's only
ratified
the
these conventions, and the
yeah.
other Southeast Asian nations have not ratified it yet.
Yes, I think for refugee, I think Cambodia and one more other country that I've forgotten off the top of my head right now. But only three countries in Southeast Asia have
Are
ratified
signatories.
for the
Or ratified.
refugee, but only
Mm-hmm.
the Philippines have only ratified the two statelessness one. So I
Mm.
think that's why it's a really big opportunity for the Philippines to push on the issue of statelessness at the ASEAN level,
Mm. Mm-hmm.
and also how that looks like is that it can also be through the ICHR, which is the ASEAN Intergovernmental Commission on Human Rights.
Mm-hmm.
There used to be a focal point on statelessness within the ICHR, and every country within ASEAN has an ICHR rep. So if the ICHR rep for the Philippines is an ally, we could advocate with them or through them to start talking or pushing the issue on statelessness at a regional level. Because so far in the last few years, ICHR has stayed silent on the issue of statelessness. And I think for the Philippines, I feel they've done a lot to address statelessness, and I think it's a good way to model and to push and advocate for other ASEAN states, for the Philippines as the ASEAN chair. Yeah, and
Mm.
what that looks like also, besides these like very high level meetings, is that when we talk about mechanisms, because you said mechanisms earlier, right? We actually only have at a regional level, we only have the ASEAN Declaration of Human Rights, which does
Uh-huh.
have a provision that recognizes the right to nationality. But
Mhm.
even then, this whole ASEAN Declaration of Human Rights is a very watered down regional mechanism that a lot of civil society don't even recognize as something that is actually useful or tangible. Like it's not
Mhm.
very helpful, but it exists nonetheless. So we appreciate that. But I think something that can be turned into more a more tangible thing is some sort of regional roadmap. Like we could
Mm.
have a
Mhm.
regional roadmap either at the ICHR or ASEAN level, that is aligned. We could work with the UNHCR because they have a global action plan to end statelessness. So traditionally, each government usually works with UNHCR to come up with a roadmap for their own country. But if the Philippines or if ASEAN wanted to really go the step further, they could come up with their own regional roadmap that is
Mm.
based on the UNHCR Global Action Plan to end statelessness to cover issues like the Bajau Laut
Mhm.
that are cross country.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also maybe there's also opportunities. There are also opportunities for like maybe to share like a case study or successful ongoing case study. There's like a memorandum of understanding between the Malaysian
Mhm.
Human Rights Commission,
Mhm.
the Indonesian Human Rights Commission, and the Philippines Human Rights Commission, and is actually to address statelessness issues in Sabah. It was signed in
Mm.
2019, and I
Mhm.
think it's still ongoing for the next until 2028. So it's actually this is the first kind of MOU of its kind in Southeast Asia because they're
Mhm.
and it's I think it's a commitment between these NHRIs to basically look for long-term solutions to for statelessness. So they will be in contact with each other, and they have a commitment between the NHRIs to work to find basically solutions to address statelessness in the shared regions. Yeah, so
Mhm.
they have like joint activities, they do public awareness, and they have meetings with their respective governments. So I think that's a very good, I guess, example of what can be done.
Mhm.
And also maybe one more example to push for is that I think it's very helpful to have a very supportive National Human Rights Commission who
Mhm.
is supportive on statelessness. So, like
Mhm.
for example, the report that I did was the first of its kind on human rights and statelessness within Peninsular Malaysia, and that was actually commissioned by SUAKAM, which is the Human Rights Commission of Malaysia. And what I think it's important to have them to be supportive because then they have a commitment towards continuing to platform and mainstream statelessness as an issue and keep pushing on it. So, like the forced eviction case that I was talking about in Sabah, the Malaysian NHRI SWAKAM was also they also did a fact finding case, and it they also help. They also are if you have a more open NHRI, they will be more open to working with civil societies who are working on statelessness
Mm.
to organize like either like joint events like forums or like workshops,
Yeah.
and having that governmental support is really important. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Nicole, for giving us examples and um, giving us ideas on how the ASEAN as a region can move forward, especially when it comes to addressing statelessness and the problems or issues faced by displaced communities or people. So, thank you so much for the insightful talk that we had during this episode. On that note, before we end, would you like to promote your social media account or website or even your organizations or any publications or upcoming projects?
Okay, thank you so much for having me. I think maybe just to share a little bit about where the organization that I'm from, Nationality for All is a regional non-for-profit organization that promotes the right to nationality, and we aim to address statelessness in the Asia Pacific region through research, advocacy, and capacity building. And I think we have an upcoming report that we're launching, and also all the information that I shared in this podcast is actually from the Statelessness Encyclopedia Asia Pacific. In brackets is SEAP. So if you just find it, it's under. If you just look at on any search platform, you can find this report.
Mm-hmm.
There are two existing editions already that focuses on the root causes of statelessness and and the impact of statelessness on the affected groups. But right now, next year, we're about to launch a third edition that focuses on digital IDs and how that impacts citizenship and legal identity. Since a lot of countries now are focusing on having digital IDs on top of your national identity cards. So yes, you can find this on the on social media and also on websites. Look for nationality for all. Yeah.
Yes, we will definitely look into that, especially the reports that you mentioned. Thank you so much, Nicole.
Thank
And
you.
thank you so much, guys, for listening to us. Join us again next week. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button on Spotify to stay updated and never miss an episode. You can also stay connected with us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube by following at WGSCNHRMEC. For more in depth information, you can also visit our website at asianhrmec.org. Thank you so much, guys, for listening to our fourth episode. We will see you again next time. Stay informed and stay engaged. Bye.